Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for checking into the best Houston sports podcast, now part of the Bleav network. And joining me is my co-host, Stephen Kerr, 65 plus years in sports journalism between the two of us. So you're in very good hands. And later in the show, the Astros have turned the season around. And we're going to look at 3 under the radar reasons among many Astros topics in this one. But first, Stephen, as we sit here Tuesday afternoon, the Rockets might be a low-key winner in free agency, even though who did they sign? What did they do? But it's true.
I think so, Robert. You know, the Rafael Stone and the front office has been very busy lately, what with the draft and, you know, the trades that they've made and, you know, the whole free agency thing. I mean, it's interesting just to see how a lot of these things are coming out, but the Rockets may very well, sometimes, you know, the quiet moves or non-moves can really make the difference, especially with a team like the Rockets that are trying to get back into the playoff race. And, you know, it's all on paper right now, but man, you have to feel good about the Rockets offseason right now.
Yeah. And this is in a lot of ways, not just about the Rockets, and
it's about the whole Western Conference, really. I mean, when you see what's been going on lately.
Yeah. To move up in the conference standings, the Rockets need to jump at least one team. We know as they finished 11th in the standings out west, and several teams severely became weakened in free agency. The Clippers lost Paul George. Golden State lost Klay Thompson. The Nuggets lost Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. And it's not as big a loss, but the Suns did lose Eric Gordon, former Rocket. Mm-hmm. Stephen, to gain ground, it helps if other teams lose ground. So these are great signs, especially with aging teams like the Clips, Suns, and Warriors.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think I saw where, didn't Chris Paul go to the Spurs? You know, there's another guy it's been around forever. And yeah, he may have good leadership qualities, but kind of makes you wonder, you know, how much of a season is he going to last? So yeah, it's been interesting to see how the Western Conference has shaken in the last couple of days. You mentioned Eric Gordon. Well, he's back in Daryl Morey's camp in the Eastern Conference with the Sixers. So he's no longer in the West. So it's interesting how this season, well, really every season, how it plays out when it comes to free agency as to not only who switches teams, but who switches conferences and where the balance of power may or may not be had once the next season comes as a result.
It wasn't all good news. A couple of teams did get stronger. The Mavericks likely got better with Klay, and OKC definitely has had the best offseason, adding Caruso and Hartenstein. I mean, that was just some good stuff from them. And they lost nothing of importance. And even though the Rockets didn't add any big names, they've got 6 young core, all likely to show some sort of improvement. If not, maybe one of them takes a leap. Plus, they add a healthy Steven Adams and Tari Eason with Reed Sheppard. And I always think of that old axiom, Stephen, if you're not getting better, you're getting worse.
That's right. Standing pat. Well, standing pat was definitely not an option for the Rockets. I mean, there's no way they could afford to do that, despite the season they had last year. They needed to go out and address some things. You know, so much talk about when you have a draft of drafting the best available player. Well, you know what? I don't always believe in that. And in the Rockets case, they didn't do that. They went out and filled a need that they really, really needed to fill, and that was shooting. I mean, if you look on paper, Reed Sheppard's shooting is lights out. I know it's college, and let's be honest, it's certainly not going to be those type of numbers in the NBA. But if he even has those respectable numbers in his first year, depending on how he develops, that's an improvement for the Rockets. He's good defensively. He's a good ball handler. And I know we'll get into the AJ Griffin trade. I know you've talked about it on a previous podcast, but you know, there's another guy. He's not a defensive liability. He's a good ball handler. So the Rockets really did address some needs that they absolutely had to, at least on paper.
Speaking of shooting, I like the signing or re-signing of Aaron Holiday. It's 2 years, $5 million per year, but really only 1 year because the Rockets, again, have made a team option on that next year like they did with Landell, Green, and Tate. These are all low-key, expiring contracts, perfect for any trade. So good stuff that Rafael Stone, I have to tip my cap to him there. And plus, they're so deep now, Stephen, when you realize this is 10 to 15 in the rotation. In no particular order: Sheppard, AJ Griffin, Holiday, Landell, Jeff Green, and Jae'Sean Tate. So if anybody goes down, if anybody is hurt or needs a night off, you've got some incredible depth.
Yeah, you certainly do. And injuries, as we know, in a 82-game NBA season, they're going to happen. You know, who would have thought Tari Eason would be down for most of the season last year? So the more depth you can add, the better. And, the lower investment means lower risk. It means you're not taking a chance and selling the farm on a lot of these guys like AJ Griffin, like Aaron Holiday. You've got options to play with. And if those guys don't work out, well, you didn't sell everything off to get them.
Yeah. And Jalen and Jabari, they were relatively healthy, but the other 4 of the core 6, I've said it and I'll keep repeating this. We lost 130 plus games between those 4. So you don't know, even with young guys, how it's going to work out. So depth is huge. And, speaking of a team that has actually lost some depth, Stephen, how excited are you that the Clips have reunited James Harden, PJ Tucker, and KPJ? Remember how unforgettable those first few games were of the 2021 Rockets? Wow.
Yeah. And how many championships did those guys win when they were with the Rockets? There's your question. I mean, yeah, that's interesting how a lot of these former Rockets getting on the same team. And, you look at that with like a lot of former Texans or former Astros. But yeah, in this case, I'm not exactly shaking in my boots thinking that the Clippers are going to be breathing down the Rockets' neck with those guys on the team all at the same time.
Yeah, unless something strange happens. And I don't know if DeMar DeRozan, even that signing, like as you and I are talking, that's rumored, but I don't know if that really moves much of the needle. I feel like, the Rockets can easily pass the Clippers. And don't forget, Kawhi had a relatively healthy season last year. James Harden, the years are going to start adding up and the injuries are going to start coming more and more. So, yeah, to me, the Clippers look like a definite team that the Rockets can sort of pass in the fast lane.
Well, and, Robert, one of the other things that I really like about this whole thing is the moves that the Rockets are making. Ime Udoka is getting the players in place that fit his system. When you talk about AJ Griffin, for instance, there's a guy that when he was with the Hawks, I think they were trying to maybe make him shoot too much and maybe too much of a fast-paced offense if he can get things out of his head. I know he had some personal issues going on. His play really dropped off. But, if he can come back to some semblance of what was expected of him when the Hawks drafted him in 2022, I think he would fit better in Ime Udoka's system just for the pace standpoint, if anything else, because I think it will be more to his pace. So with moves like this, and then the drafting of Reed Sheppard that I think would be a good fit, the Rockets are getting the players. They started to do this last year, but they molded some of these young guys into Ime Udoka's system. Well, now they're adding some more elements that I think are just right for the system that Ime is trying to do, which I'd say would increase the chances of him getting back to the playoffs.
Let's go back to Reed Sheppard for a second, because I listened to his presser today, and Stephen, there wasn't any unforgettable quotes in there, but you can't help but be impressed by how composed and thoughtful he sounds. Very humble and likable too.
Yeah, and that's the kind of guy you need, I think. There's a good mixture. Reed Sheppard, you hear all kinds of good things about him. And by the way, I just saw before we started recording, Robert, he's going to wear the number 15 jersey for the season. And, there have been a few guys that weren't. Clint Capella is one. Joey Dorsey was another. There's a number of guys that have worn the number 15 jersey. And looks like Reed Sheppard is going to be the guy that he's going to wear number 15 for the Rockets. But I think it's a good addition all the way around, not just from the talent standpoint, but from a personal standpoint. He seems like an all-around good guy. He comes from good stock. He certainly comes from a good school that, been kind of up and down in recent years, but the college basketball landscape has changed so much. I don't know that you can necessarily blame the school itself for everything that's going on. So, yeah, I really liked the pick. I felt that, look, I really thought they would trade that number 3 pick, but if they weren't going to do that, then they definitely needed to go out and get a player that filled a void that the Rockets really had. And I think Reed Sheppard does that.
You mentioned the number that he chose. I don't think there's any better choice of number than the number Dalton Connect picked with the Lakers.
Number 4. What is it? Connect 4. Yeah, that's
Yes.
what I saw. I saw that too. And that's the first thing I thought about is, that's a great name, Dalton Connect. But then you put the number to it. Right now, I'd say he's the front runner as far as NBA nicknames go.
He's already my favorite Laker just for doing that.
Well, speaking of that, kind of segs into something I wanted to bring up. With the Rockets, the Summer League play is going to be starting on July 12th. You're probably going to get to see guys like AJ Griffin, Cam Whitmore, and, Amen Thompson, I don't think is going to be on there, and neither is Jabari. But they're going to be playing their first game in the Summer League against the Lakers. So you're going to get to see Connect 4, and you're going to get to see Bronny James right off the bat. That's pretty intriguing.
Yeah, I heard Bronny James's mom is sleeping with one of the Lakers players. It's a terrible
little
internet thing.
private inside joke there. You can go back
Yeah,
and Google it, and I'm sure you'll read all about it, right?
yeah, it's a terrible internet deal, but I just had to throw that in there. And yeah, we talked about Sheppard. If you want more about Reed Sheppard, tomorrow I'll be posting a brand new interview with Aaron Gershon, part of our Bleav network, who covered him at Kentucky. And yesterday I spoke to Hawks insider Bryce Davis about AJ Griffin. You definitely want to look for those two conversations. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube or your favorite podcast app so you can listen on the go. All right, Steven, since you and I did our last Astros podcast together, June 18th, the Astros have gone from 7 games under 500 and 10 games out of first place in the West to 2 games above 500 and 3 games out. Wow.
Yeah, maybe we shouldn't be podcasting. Maybe we should take a longer break and see if they can keep going. Here's a number that I saw, Robert, that is really interesting. Remember when the Astros were 7-19 in the first 26 games of the season? And you and I, we hadn't completely written them off yet, but we were going, what the heck is wrong with these guys? Well, since that point, and we're recording this on Tuesday, July 2nd, the Astros are 36-22. And they finished the month of June. They had the best record in the major leagues during the month of June at 17-8. I mean, this is more like the Astros team that we're accustomed to seeing. It's still an amazing turnaround when you think of how far they've had to dig themselves out of a hole from that 7-19 to where they are now, just above 500. It's been remarkable, Robert, especially considering just all the bad misfortune that they've had this year.
Yeah, I wonder where their percentage is. I should have done a little bit of research on this, but what their winning percentage is this year without Jose Abreu on the team.
Yeah, well, especially since he got waived, but even when he was in Florida, it'd be nice to kind of see I think the turnaround kind of started around that time.
Oh yeah, they're way over 500 without him.
Yeah.
And I have 3 players, by the way. I've got 3 players who deserve a ton of love. We talk about so many Astros and more higher name guys, but these guys don't get much noise and they deserve it. Number 1, Taylor Scott, the surprise of the season. The surprise of the season, I should say, not named Ronel Blanco. His career whip is 1.619 right now. It's 1.016. And this weekend, he gave the Astros 3 straight crucial appearances against the Mets when they had a bullpen game and a long rain delay. Hat tip to the Aussie. Number 2, Sean Dubin.
Yep.
He had a really important 3 shutout inning start in Sunday's game against the Mets. His ERA in June was 3. Props to Dubin. Next up, number 3 on my list, Steven, Cesar Salazar. Since his call-up after Caratini went down, he's hit .357 with an .833 OPS and has done a really nice job with a very young pitching staff.
Yeah, all 3 of those guys, Robert, it emphasizes what I have said so many times is that, people can sit and talk about the Astros farm system and how weak it is all they want. But when it comes down to it, sometimes a lot of these guys, they may be under the radar just as much as, you can have a prospect. Let's use Forrest Whitley as an example. There's somebody that was really, really highly talented that just hasn't made it. Now, Taylor Scott was one. I mean, he wasn't drafted by the Astros, but this was a guy that I was hearing about during spring training. A lot of people were, the Astros front office was real high on him. They kept, pumping him up. And he's definitely been worth the hype this year because he certainly has come through. You mentioned those 3 Mets games, but it just seems like when Taylor Scott comes in there, especially if things have been falling apart, the game isn't going well, he's just a guy that seems to mow them down. And Sean Dubin's a guy, he's been toiling in the minor leagues for a little while, especially in AAA. I mean, his name's been kind of, bounced around the last couple of years in AAA. So it's good to see him finally get his due. Cesar Salazar, remember, wasn't it last year, Robert? I think he was one of the surprise choices to make the opening day roster when the Astros went with 3 catchers. You're like, wait, Cesar Salazar, what is he doing up here? And he didn't do a whole lot then. So it's really cool to see him come up and really making a difference. He's gotten some crucial hits. And as you said, he's really handled the Astros pitching staff well. So all 3 of those guys are reasons that the Astros have turned things around. We talk about the next man up mentality. Well, here you are, you keep bringing these guys up, and then you have guys like Jake Bloss that you were hoping would, do something right off the bat, and he comes in and gets hurt right away, but they just keep plugging along.
The storyline out of nowhere the last 2 months, though, is Hunter Brown is kind of looking like an ace. Chandler Rome quoted Bregman, who said he has a Cy Young type arm. ESPN Sarah Langs had a crazy stat. Hunter has a sub 0.3 ERA in his last 5 starts. The only Astros pitchers who've ever done that are Nolan, J.R. Richard, and Jim Deshaies. The last time it happened was 38 years ago, and all those other guys got the luxury of pitching in the dome, Stephen. He's got a 1.99 ERA in his last 11 appearances.
38 years ago, that would be in the 1986 team.
Yes.
So that makes perfect sense. And, well, we've talked about waiting for Hunter to turn things around, and at the beginning of the season, it was really looking shaky. And I tell you what, I don't think the Astros would be where they are right now, Robert. There's no way they would be if Hunter were still in the same throes of struggles that he was at the beginning of the season. I mean, it has been remarkable what this guy has done. And it's great. He's added the new pitch that I think has made a big difference. So, man, if he can keep it rolling, that is definitely a big help.
Astros fans turned on Alex Bregman this year quicker than you could say.
Including me.
Yeah.
You can throw me in the mix. I did an Alex rant earlier in the season on this podcast.
Well, did you know this, though? And this is why we forget the value of this guy. Alex Bregman has been helping Hunter Brown game plan, and he is getting a ton of credit for his turnaround, Stephen.
Well, I wouldn't argue that. I mean, not at all. I still don't think I would sign him to the max contract he might be asking for at the end of the season. But, I mean, it's interesting who some of the guys are that it doesn't have to be other fellow pitchers. It could be hitting coaches, telling a pitcher a thing or two. And in this case, Alex Bregman, a hitter, giving some tips to Hunter Brown. So, yeah, that's pretty interesting.
Can't we just make Alex Bregman a player coach, and then Jim Crane can throw some money that doesn't count against the cap at him for the coaching salary? Is that possible to do?
Yeah, I don't know. We'd have to, probably do some another collective bargaining agreement to make that happen. But yeah, that's an interesting point. Yeah, maybe something that Alex could do in the future. Maybe he'd be a good hitting coach or a bench coach or something.
Here's some more fun with numbers, Stephen. The Astros have the 5th best ERA in baseball since the beginning of May. And since Joe Espada gave Yainer a 2-day break at the beginning of June, you might remember that, he's now batting .345 in that stretch with a .907 OPS in his last 21 games. So, that's some really good news from both of those stats.
Yeah, and sometimes that's what you need is a reset. It doesn't work with everybody. You see the normal 1 day off, but in Yainer's case, it was a 2-day layoff. And yeah, he's been more of the hitter that we were used to seeing last year. And, Jake Myers has had his ups and downs, but he's still plugging along. I mean, he had a home run the other day. I think it was, in the Mets series. So it's just good to see some of these guys that we were kind of on the fence about, weren't really sure about, or even guys that we thought might have come down seasons from last year, really starting to pick it up now.
Luis Garcia makes his second AA start with Corpus Thursday. Stephen, the last I heard on Verlander was that he started throwing a couple of days ago. Have you seen any more recent updates?
Yeah, that's the last thing. They haven't made a decision as far as, what Verlander is going to start. So, yeah, he is at least throwing again. And, of course, we knew that JP France would be out the rest of the year, but he did just have shoulder surgery. So he's going to be gone. But, yeah, Luis Garcia, it's going to be interesting. I definitely – he had one rehab assignment. I think it was in A-ball, or maybe it was in the Florida Coastal League. But the second one I think will be very pivotal because it'll be in AA. So I'm really anxious to see what Luis Garcia is going to show as he starts making his comeback. I think they're still projecting him maybe sometime around the end of July.
And as far as I've heard from Lance McCullers, he can't throw overhead yet, but he can play that old skeeter ball at Dave & Buster's, from what I understand.
I think Lance is still a ways away. I think they were hoping that both of those guys, him and Luis Garcia, would come back in July. But, yeah, I'm not sure that Lance is going to be ready for July just yet.
I don't know if you find it annoying, Stephen, but I don't understand all this traction on a potential Astros trade for a first baseman, considering the Astros have 5 veteran starting pitchers out right now. I mean, we know this, Stephen. You and I have been watching baseball since the 60s and 70s. You can never have enough pitching. Never, 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 never.
No, you certainly cannot, especially, I just mentioned Jake Bloss. I mean, here's a guy that was just pitching lights out in not even a full season, really. So you're thinking, here's a guy, he's got a fresh arm. He's going to come up, and he pitches 3 innings and has to be come out of the game because of arm problems. So that just tells you right there. It's like anybody that's going to pitch for the Astros, it might be a bad luck charm for them because they're going to get hurt. So, yeah, there's no way you can have too much pitching. And, as far as the first baseman situation, I think you basically took care of the need, at least temporarily, by removing the thorn that was in your side at first base and Jose Abreu. I think that alone it definitely improved your situation at first base. And I know that it was in the extra inning game in Toronto on Monday, I think it was, that Joey Loperfido, he came in, I think, in the late innings, and they did have him at first base. So you at least have some versatility now that you can put. And the Astros also brought back up Ray Kessinger, who I know could, spell at first base if they need be. So I'm not sure that's your most pressing need right now, especially since you got rid of the biggest liability at that position.
And let me ask you this, Stephen. If you can actually get to the postseason, you look at what the best lineup for this team would be. And I would argue that the first baseman, because he's the best defensively, and you don't want him other places in the lineup because you would rather these other guys play, like potentially Loperfido, Jake Myers, Yordan Alvarez. The guy that you want at first base is Mauricio Dubon. Dubon is the best clutch hitter on this team, and I think he'd be playing first base in the postseason. And why go out and get somebody when Dubon has just been fantastic?
Yeah, well, that's another name. I didn't even think about that. Mauricio Dubon could be a definite option. So, I mean, you've got guys that you can toss around. And, let's say Jonathan Singleton suddenly hits the skids again, and you've got other options. You've got Loperfido that you can put in there because he has played some first base now. You've got Mauricio Dubon. Yeah, I'd say that would be your best option. If you're looking at an everyday guy, but again, it depends on how, what the injury situation would be by the end of the season, how guys are doing, as far as being in a slump. But yeah, Mauricio Dubon, I mean, it's a name you got to throw in the mix for first base.
We have seen rare anger from Jose Altuve the last couple of weeks. This is like seeing your dad, like, why is that? I never see him get angry. He's father knows best. He's the dad on Leave It to Be. This is so, he even pulled Stephen the pine tar George Brett tantrum the other day.
I know. And the funny thing is now, didn't he have another incident a few weeks ago? I don't think he got tossed, but there was another.
No, he got mad. That's what I'm saying. It was a couple of times because it was, he got mad. I want to say maybe it's the Angels.
It was 3 weeks ago. It
was like a bad call on a strike or something maybe.
Right. And this one, I guess, he fouled a ball off his foot. Yeah. And he broke his helmet. Yeah. I mean, it's just so uncharacteristic of him. I don't know if it's just, the frustration of how the season has been for the team, but then, of course, they're playing better now. But I think up until those times, Robert, I don't think Jose Altuve has been ejected. I think it was 2016 was the last time that happened. So definitely very uncharacteristic of a guy that when Jose Altuve disagrees with a ball strike call, then, there's something going on. So you tend to kind of give him the benefit of the doubt with that sort of thing.
Yeah, no question about it. One last thing I've gotten, if you've got anything else after this, go for it. But Yordan says he's got no interest in the home run derby. How do you feel about that?
I don't have a problem with it, honestly, because as great as you'd like to see your guys represented, you watch the home run derby, Robert, it really takes a lot out of you. And you see so many hitters who do it. And I don't know if you could really put this to paper, but then when the season begins again, it's like they've run out of gas. So you know what? If Yordan Alvarez doesn't want to do the home run derby, I'm in his corner, because if it means he's going to hit more home runs and get better because he's starting to finally find his groove, I'm not going to argue with it.
Anything else Astros related that you want to throw out there before we move on?
Not really. I mean, it's just so good to see that they're turning things around. They're starting, they're even starting to come back. Even when they get themselves in a hole, they're starting to get that same confidence that they had at one point of being able to come back. It happened in the Mets series. And then, when they were the ones that blow the lead, they get it back. So this team is definitely starting to look like the 7 years in a row of ALCS teams that we're used to seeing.
My favorite thing, Stephen, offensively is they're finally learning to get runs in on outs instead of base hits.
Yeah, manufacturing runs, and that's a big deal. And if you can do that, whether it's a sacrifice fly, you advance a runner here and there, I mean, it makes a big difference. You can't just go for the long ball all the time. You've got to know how to manufacture runs. I noticed lately, too, that I think the Astros were among the leaders of fewest pitches in a game at the plate, having fewer pitches at the plate. Well, now they're starting to show patience. And again, that's going to, the more pitches they get at the plate, the more walks they could draw, the more things that can happen, the more good pitches they're going to see. So that's another thing to point out.
Yeah, last thing, I just want to throw this out there, and I don't have this in my notes, but I was just thinking about it because I think I put something up on social media about it. Rafael Montero is just, he takes a beating, and I don't think it's fair to him. The Astros weren't forced at gunpoint by Rafael Montero to get that money, and the guy basically took you to Major League Baseball's best bullpen performance in a postseason in 2022. You couldn't have won the championship without how great he was. There's the whole bullpen, but he was very much a part of that throughout that season. Once they made the trade for him, he really came up big. And it just kind of frustrates me because, this is about Jim Crane. If you want to go at somebody, you go at Jim Crane. But I don't want Montero to have to not go on social media because he's not the bad guy here. He's doing the best he can. He had a career season that year. It wasn't like it was a secret that it was a career season. He's just still being Rafael Montero.
Well, and listen, compared to last year, I mean, if you want to get on the guy, last year would have been the year. And anytime that a player signs a huge contract like that and doesn't perform, they're going to hear those buzzers going off, the gongs and whatever, and all the talk. But listen, Rafael Montero certainly has had a better season this year than he has last year. And you're right. I mean, he didn't have to sign that contract. Wasn't he the first one of those relievers? I mean, the season was barely over and Montero had already signed that big contract. So they wasted no time in making sure they locked him up before they locked up a lot of other guys. So yeah, Jim Crane's the guy you want to come back for on that. We've talked about it, but at least I think Rafael Montero is earning his money more this year, certainly than he was last year.
Last year, his ERA was 5.08. This year, it's 4.31. His whip's down a little bit, but still not great. 1.4.
It's not great, but as the season goes on, perhaps it will get a little better. And you certainly can't blame him for the team is playing better lately, so he's certainly not been a liability in that regard.
Yeah, he's having a tough stretch right now, though, and he needs to get out of it. But yeah. Last point I've got, just before we go, I got to say, it's just so cool to watch Simone Biles kicking butt again at the Olympic trials. She's still absolutely an electric performer with incredible charisma, maybe the most charisma of anybody in sports right now. I mean, I don't know. You might argue somebody else, but her excellence is also, Stephen, just lifted the entire Team USA women's gymnastics program because you can see the talent has never looked better. I mean, we're just loaded. I mean, there was girls, I was like, these poor girls aren't making the team. They're incredible. They would have made the team 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah, and I know they've even had some injuries, and yet they're still a top-notch team. Simone Biles, Robert, is if there's ever an example of an athlete who puts their well-being first and then comes back and looks just as good as ever. I think, when she won the other day, I tweeted or I quoted a tweet from someone else, and I can't remember who it was now. It might have been from Team USA because I do some writing for them every now and then. I think I said something like the GOAT just keeps rolling along. And that's what she's doing. She took that time off for mental health. And, she had the courage to do that. She had the foresight to know when it was time to stop. And then she knew that she could come back and still be as great as she ever is. That's just an example of how great Simone Biles is. Never mind the talent. I mean, that's obvious. But the fact that she can go through some struggles and say, you know what, I need to step back from this. And with a lot of athletes, that would probably hurt them from a talent standpoint, coming back and trying to make a team. Well, obviously not Simone Biles, because here she is.
And the cool thing, because of how the Olympics has changed and that you can make money, the Olympians now can take some time off for a year or two and rest themselves and kind of recover, which Simone Biles has taken advantage of some time here and there. So she's ready and can compete and have a longer Olympic career. This is her third Olympics now. And, that we just didn't see that with women's gymnasts in the past.
No, you didn't. And Robert, something else you just said, the fact that she can come back despite the fact of, how strong the U.S. gymnastics team is. And like I said, with a lot of other athletes, they're on the outside looking in if they did something like that. So it's a testament to just how good Simone Biles is that she can do all that.
And just not just compete with, she's still so much better.
Oh, I know. Yeah, she's not just, holding her own. She's still winning.
Yeah, I can't remember what the number was, but she got 12 feet in the air on her tumbling passes. They were showing that, and they were saying, what's the comparison for like if LeBron James was trying to go dunk on a 12-foot rim, I guess would be the equivalent.
Yeah, something like that.
Like that's pretty. I mean, she's 4'8". Let's remember that. She's 4'8".
She certainly works hard as anyone does, and the training that goes into something like that. But boy, when you can get up there that much, when you're 4'8", hey man, that's. I mean, you and I couldn't do that, Robert. We're taller than she is, but it is. In all seriousness, it's amazing, and it's just great that we can cheer for someone. If you're from Houston, a local product and somebody that has been on Houston Sports Talk, Robert, there's the HST bump for you once again.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I know it hasn't been recent, but
we shot her into stardom.
Yeah,
we shot her into stardom.
Yes, you did.
That interview, I want to say, was 10 years ago now. It's a decade since we talked to her, and she's done all right since then. So just love getting to see her. Hopefully there's going to be no twisties in a month or whenever the Olympics start here in Paris. But looking forward to that. Looking forward to some more Astros baseball. Finally get to look forward to some Astros baseball. Can't wait for the Rockets summer league season to start up so I can see Reed Sheppard in a Rockets uniform. I want to see some real shooting that we don't get to see a lot with the Rockets.
That's for sure. Yeah. Oh, and let's not forget, we're recording this, as I said, on July 2nd. July 18th, Texans training camp gets underway.
And Andre Johnson's getting in the Hall of Fame not too long from now.
That's right. And they'll be in the Hall of Fame game as a result.
Yeah, if you're an Andre Johnson fan and you haven't checked out our Andre Johnson tribute with a lot of incredible sound from people that we've talked about Andre over the years, guys that played with him, guys that covered him, just really fun to do that show a few months ago as a tribute when he got into Canton. So I can't wait for that. It's just a fun time to be a Houston sports fan, like we keep saying. It's really good, and can't wait to do this again with you next week, Stephen.
Sounds good, Robert. See you then.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Hey, don't forget to support us by subscribing and commenting on YouTube. You can always listen to us on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast app. Tell your friends about us and share our show links on social media. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.